Historical Reconstruction of Aryan X.
Episode 57, The Doppelgänger of History. As we go about our daily lives, we call a person who looks similar or identical to ourselves but lives in the same space without ever meeting a doppelganger. Occasionally, in movies, we have had the chance to see scenes where a doppelganger, someone who looks exactly like the protagonist, coexists in the same place and space without the protagonist's awareness. The Doppelgänger of History. However, just like those scenes in the movies, if you study history, you can have the opportunity to see a doppelganger of the same historical content in a different region during the same era. This is something that can only be seen when one has the knowledge and awareness that such a thing exists. If utilized well, it could be possible to restore and correct the framework of manipulated history. For example, I will cite the history of the Elam Empire in the Middle East. One day, about 12 years ago when I first started studying history, I was taking a look at the history of the Elam Empire in the Middle East, which includes kingdoms such as Sumer, the Hittites, Akkad, and Assyria, to examine Middle Eastern history. Suddenly, a strong suspicion began to arise. Why is the historical arrangement of the Middle Eastern Elam Empire identical to the content and arrangement of the 25 dynastic histories of China, which were located in Turkmenistan, Central Asia? And just as I suspected, I discovered that the history of the Elam Empire in the Middle East was an exact copy of the 25 dynastic histories of China that were in Turkmenistan, Central Asia. If you take on the challenge, you will be able to find out. Whose history from the 25 dynastic histories of China did Sumer copy? Whose history from the 25 dynastic histories of China did the Hittites copy? And whose history from the 25 dynastic histories of China did Assyria copy? The history of the Indian Empire. Having discovered the doppelganger called the Elam Empire, which was said to have been in the Middle East, since the early days of my history studies, a preconception I now have when uncovering the manipulated histories of each continent is to wonder, whose history from the 25 dynastic histories of China did this also copy? So, by simply summarizing the current history of India chronologically and listing it on the left, and contrasting it with the summary of the 25 dynastic histories of China that were in Turkmenistan, Central Asia on the right, I was able to immediately recognize that the exact same historical content and situations unfold. Korean history and Chinese history. You probably have never noticed that the history of Korea, the history of China, and the contents of the history of Japan are overlapping doppelgangers. That is the difference in proficiency between the people of the world and Aryan X. You have all simply memorized historical content and circumstances without understanding them, while Aryan X did not memorize but began to understand them calmly one by one. As a result, the patterns of manipulated history and their contents began to become visible. The entire world had only one history, that of the Scythian-Arian. Consequently, as the world was divided into more than 200 countries, centered around the modern UN, there was a desperate need to manipulate and implant history into each of those 200-plus divided nations. As one history was split into the required number of pieces and transplanted into each region, these historical doppelgangers came into being. Almost all the history that people around the world have learned until now has been, in this way, a manipulated doppelganger. Now, I will introduce the most interesting doppelganger in history. The central history of the Scythian-Arian, which was in Turkmenistan, Central Asia, was destroyed and erased, and then moved and transplanted to present-day Korea in the Far East. And simultaneously, the history of these Scythian-Arian Koreans was transplanted into the nearby country of the destroyed Central Asian nation, Uzbekistan. With the strong confidence that no one would be interested in comparing the histories of present-day Korea and Uzbekistan, separated by a distance of 30,000 li, they subtly separated the Korean history of the Scythian-Aryans and transplanted it directly into present-day Uzbekistan. Its name is the Timurid Empire. If you compare the succession to the throne from the 1st to the 7th generation of the Timurid Empire, and, in the same order, the Joseon dynasty of Korean history from the 1st to the 7th generation, you will be able to vividly confirm that the historical content is identical. I have stated that the actual stage of Korean history, located in the Far East, was Turkmenistan in Central Asia. However, the historical stage there was destroyed and erased, and the history of Korea was transplanted into the nearby Central Asian country of Uzbekistan. That was the Timurid Empire. We now live in a society where we can check the topography and situation at the opposite end of the Earth in a single second through Google Earth. The forces that manipulated history over 100 years ago, of course, could not have imagined the advent of this era of speed and SNS. They would not have thought that this development of science would become a touchstone for revealing manipulated history. The history of the whole world. To summarize the history of humanity, there has only been one history in the entire world. That is the great history of the Scythian-Arian, and it is also the history of all the people on our planet. Consequently, as history was created and transplanted into the approximately 200 countries that were torn apart in the modern era, that one precious history was shredded and transplanted, resulting in the emergence of historical doppelgangers where the same historical content appears duplicated everywhere. Please keep this point in mind as you study history. Have any of you seen the history of your own country, which you know, being discovered in another region? It will surely become visible to you. Now, in the next episode, we plan to reveal the secret of Shakespeare, the great writer of England. So I sincerely hope that you will contact many people and participate in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The heavens and the earth will tremble. The subtitle language can be translated into the language of each country, so please be sure to make use of it. If there are any issues, please contact us via the comments or through Google Mail. The Google Mail address is arianrealhistory@gmail.com. The YouTube video addresses are Historical Reconstruction of Arian X or History Restoration of Arian X. Your subscriptions and likes are your conscience and passion for the truth, so please do not forget them.